Corazón, mi corazón. ¿Qué corazón, mi corazón?
Señor presidente, les habla el presidente.
¿Qué corazón, mi corazón? ¿Qué corazón, mi corazón?
Manu Chao is a musician of Spanish descent who grew up on the outskirts of Paris, so he is billed as being French-Spanish. In the mid-80s, he was in a Spanish/English rockabilly group called Hot Pants. In 1987, with his brother and his cousin, he founded the band Mano Negra, which combined punk and world music influences and could be found playing on the Paris Metro. The band took off and had 4 studio albums. In 1995, Manu went solo, but formed the band Radio Bemba Sound System to be his backing band. And the punk elements were less prominent now, but he started to make music that, quote, replicates the sound of, quote, replicates the sound of street music and bar scenes from a variety of cultures, unquote. He has been really popular in some parts of Europe. Hi, my name's Dan. So this album was Manu Chao's second studio album as a solo artist, so basically working under his own name, but of course he's not on his own, he's got a band backing him. In Spanish, the name of the album means Next Station Hope, and is named after a real station on the Madrid Metro, which is just brilliant. The album reached top 10 slots in Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Holland, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland. And words on the album are in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, Galician, and Portuguese. Okay, so there's quite a lot going on here, and my history with this album is that a few years ago I hadn't heard it at all, but prior to this list that I'm reviewing in videos, I created a list which was not as good a list, but was still taken from an amalgamation of other people's lists, and was reviewing through a blog that I had. I got about halfway through before I discovered this list, and then moved on to video instead of text. So I reviewed this album quite early on in that list, and so some of this review is taken directly from that review. I've listened to it again, and I absolutely agree with the review that I had. I've added some stuff, and I've upped the score since then. Partly because, having reviewed it and discovered that I really liked it, I have listened to this several times since as well over the last couple of years. I really enjoy it. I'm going to say, go out there and say I love this album. So let's try and describe it. I was being a bit florid in my previous review, but let's just replicate that. So take a half a cup of the Gypsy Kings, a bit of gypsy brass band from Eastern Europe, add in some Hawaiian ukulele sounds, New Orleans brass bits of calypso, jazz, and pour a pot full of reggae and Latin beats in and mix it up. Add some dub-style production, loads of sound clips, which are mostly speech, and if you don't think I'm doing a very good job of description, you just have to listen for yourself, and then you try and describe it, because it really is a melting pot here. Each track's got different elements. Somehow it intelligently draws out similarities and fuses together different traditions, while managing at the same time to also have elements of electronica and world music going on. It's a big bucket of crazy stuff. So sometimes in these reviews, when I'm listening to styles that are not really what I would listen to for pleasure, I have ignorance. I've just done a review for Ornette Coleman in free jazz. I'm definitely not a connoisseur in that area. I wouldn't say I'm a huge expert in world music, but it is something that I've got more of a listening history to. So I do know enough to be able to hear some of the influences that are at play here. In some senses, the music here is quite simple because it tends to be quite straightforward harmonically and repeated chord sequence. But in terms of the way it brings together different styles and traditions, it's got a kind of unique sophistication to it and intelligence. And it's just really happy music. It's just bouncy and boppy. It's just Yeah, I absolutely love it. As I've mentioned, there's some electronica kind of ideas going on here. So it's long and evolving. The tracks all run into each other, which is something that I often seem to enjoy. There are things like dub bass sounds used. There's lots of spoken word samples that come in. Some of the arrangement sound like there's been some sampling, and there's certainly sequencing going on. But it's hard to tell at times, because some of the best music that does this does it in such a way that it kind of, it sounds like it could be that, but sometimes it isn't, sometimes it isn't, and they blur the edges, and I often like music that does that. There's some particular sounds that come in at various points during the album. There's a sped-up voice, which kind of, I enjoy. I quite often enjoy that. There's this particular, I can't describe it anything better than a wibbly ping. It's kind of bang, but with kind of tremolo on it. That comes in a few different tracks. There's a swanny whistle, which is the kind with the plunger at the bottom. Go, reminds me of the clangers from British TV shows. That's used to really good effect. It doesn't have a perpetual bass drum beat like a lot of electronic music does, but in terms of rhythms, that a lot of it has the sort of offbeat emphasis that you might associate with reggae. When I say reggae, I know reggae is actually a continuum. The slow stuff's reggae, the fast stuff's ska. Somewhere in between, there's dancehall, and there's rocksteady somewhere in there as well. I don't know the fine gradations of this, but also that offbeat thing is also kind of reminiscent of stuff from Eastern Europe, and stuff from kind of Jewish tradition, that kind of thing. And it does this, as I say, kind of makes a kind of musical comparison between these different styles and brings them together. And this is one of the things that I really enjoy about it. There are, as I said before, there's several languages here, both the spoken stuff and the sung stuff. The lyrics that I understood, mostly were the English ones. There are occasional bits actually in Spanish and French that I actually picked up in this. Partly that's because it's fairly straightforward and simple stuff. Everything's kind of generally positive. So for the English tracks, there's a tale of going on a date to a French film. There's warnings about the social consequences of promiscuity, which is a bit more of a social commentary, but it's all done very simply. And there's an entreaty to Bobby Marley to sing a good song. So there's definitely some, that's Bob Marley that he's talking about. And as you may have got the impression so far, the whole thing is a continuum, and so the album as a whole works even better than any individual track. So I would always say that this album works best if you listen to it as an album in the right order. So my previous time that I reviewed this, I accidentally ended up on shuffle one time, and it just did not make as much sense. It just didn't work. It was still good music, but it didn't have the kind of ebb and flow and the arc of the album. So it's great. I really love it, and I'd love to know what you think, so please talk to me with the comments box. That's it from me for now.